All right, it is now official, as I'm sure you all saw by now, but if you didn't, as reported by Shams Charania, Giannis is ready for a new home, whether that be before the trade deadline, next week, or in the offseason. He is going to be on his way out of Milwaukee. They didn't officially call this a trade request, but it essentially is. Giannis realized he's not going to win with this team. Their future is bleak from a cap sheet perspective and limited draft capital. And even for the Bucks, I think they finally realized it was in their best interest to move on from Giannis and start down a path of rebuilding with the hopes that a trade package would put them on a path to recoup some of their future assets. And so, well, we don't know whether Giannis will in fact be traded before the deadline or in the summer. One thing is certain, he will be playing for another team next season. Now, of course, there's going to be a plethora of teams fighting for Giannis and creating a bidding war for his services, and I'm sure in the coming days we will have more clarity on a potential short list of destinations that Giannis wants to play for. But when it comes to teams that actually have assets to make a strong offer to the Bucks for Giannis, it really is only a handful. And while I don't think the Bulls are going to be one of those teams, or at least I don't think Giannis is going to want to be traded to Chicago since he's looking to win a championship now and the Bulls simply are not there, but it might surprise a lot of people that the Bulls actually have the ability, the salaries, the assets to make a compelling offer for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not saying they can offer the best package more than any other team in the NBA, but it's up there if the Bulls actually wanted to make an all-in move for Giannis. What would a trade package look like for him? Let's talk about it. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I know a lot of people are going to come in here and say, there's no way the Bulls would ever have a shot at Giannis. He wants to go somewhere where he can win. And then, of course, there will be some that will say, the Bulls shouldn't even be in the business of going all in and mortgaging their future, even if it is for a player like Giannis, because the Bulls should be focusing on rebuilding and not trying to cut corners and building out a contender. I'm fully aware of all this. I know the Bulls probably aren't even going to be in the conversation when it comes to the Giannis sweepstakes. And yes, I'm aware of the risks of going all in on Giannis, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But unlike in years past, where the Bulls were devoid of trade chips, where they had an older roster, limited draft capital, the Bulls are now, more than ever before, can actually make an all-in push for a superstar if they really wanted to, because unlike in years past, the Bulls actually have control of all their first-round picks, including the pick from Portland, which could potentially convey if the Blazers can make the playoffs this season. That means the Bulls have up to 5 tradable first-round picks, 4 of which are their own and the other from Portland. Only 4 since, due to the Stepien rule, you can't trade consecutive first-round picks, so the Bulls could trade their picks in 26, 28, 30, and 2032. The Bulls also have a ton of expiring contracts on their roster, which will be of interest to Milwaukee, as it would give them cap relief going into the summer, which they're going to need if they're going to go down a path of rebuilding. This would include the contracts of Vucevic, Zach Collins, and/or Kevin Huerter. And then, of course, the Bulls also have some young players that the Bucks are going to be focused on in any trade deal they make for Giannis. Young players with some upside that they can start building with for the future. Now, here's the thing, and it's honestly what makes me question whether it's worth making an all-in move for Giannis, because you'd have to think it's most certainly going to include Modest Bucelis. I really don't think the Bucks are going to be interested in much of the Bulls' young talent outside of Modest. Yeah, maybe to an extent Josh Giddey, but if you're trading for Giannis, you kind of want Giddey to be part of that duo, and I'll talk about the fit between those two in a little bit. But Modest, more likely than not, would need to be included. Like, I played around and included Asenge, Kobe White, Aodosumu. Maybe you can include Isaac Okoro, but I don't think that's going to move the needle for the Bucks, not at least when it comes to some of the other offers they're going to get around the league of actual young talent with high upside. Asenge is intriguing because he's so young, but he's still so raw and obviously barely played before suffering a season-ending injury, so there's very little data to go off of to understand his true potential. And so if you're going to include Modest and all of your future picks among other players for salary filler purposes, is that worth it if you're the Bulls? Some will say yes, absolutely. Whenever you have a chance at landing a top 5 player in the league, you go for it. But then you also have to consider the fact that Giannis isn't 26 years old anymore. Like, as great as he still is, he's now 31. Still young, but not a player who is going to have a decade-plus long prime window ahead of him. And let's also not downplay these injuries that he's sustained so far this season. The same calf issues, he was sidelined earlier in the year for a couple weeks, now he's out for 4 to 6 weeks. Giannis has been the embodiment of good health and durability throughout his career. But how do we know that that's going to continue now that he's getting hit with these injuries and he's on the wrong side of 30? So yes, trading the farm for Giannis is a high-risk scenario, especially if he somehow starts to decline more rapidly than expected. The other thing that's really going to hold a deal back, and this really goes for any team that would trade for Giannis, not just the Bulls, you need assurances that he's going to sign with you long term. He only has one more year left on his current contract that is guaranteed. He has a player option worth $62 million for the 27-28 season, which he can easily decline to re-up for more longer-term money. Like, that's where Giannis holds some of the cards in dictating where he wants to be traded, because you can say, well, he's under contract. He doesn't get a say on where he goes. The Bucks can trade him wherever they get the best offer. Yes and no, because any team making a trade offer for Giannis is going to ensure that he's going to re-sign with them, which, by the way, he is extension eligible this summer. If a team gets any sense, or hell, Giannis even says, I'm not signing an extension with your team, then said team is not going to make an offer for him, or they won't offer as much anyway because it's too big of a risk. The last thing you want to do is trade a massive haul of picks and young players and then Giannis just leaves after a season and a half. So Giannis will have control over where he goes, because he can simply tell certain teams, you can trade for me, but I'm not signing an extension. And that in and of itself takes a lot of teams out of the bidding war, which yes, includes the Chicago Bulls. Because while yeah, what the Bulls have going for them is they're a big market team, which Giannis has said he wants to play in a big market. Yes, it's the house MJ built, and Giannis has made comments in the past that he would maybe one day love to play in Chicago, where the greatest player of all time played. But outside of that, this isn't a situation where Giannis can start contending right away if he's thrown on the Bulls roster, especially when you're talking about gutting a lot of the roster just to get him. Like, yes, as much as I'm biased at times about this team, I'm also realistic in understanding their current situation, and also the fact that they don't have the best track record as a franchise that produces success in winning. And that's going to be a deterrent in Giannis's interest to come and play for Chicago. The other thing too, where I think the Bulls have really messed up, is they've lost a lot of bad games to a lot of bad teams this year. I mean, they had that horrible stretch, right, earlier in the year, that losing streak where they lost to some of the worst teams in the league. I mean, even just winning half of those games when they played the Pelicans, Pacers, Hornets, Nets, etc., they would actually be in a position where they're 5 or 6 games above 500 and sitting 5th or 6th in the East, which maybe that looks more intriguing to Giannis in terms of his belief that this team may actually have a playoff run in them if he joined that squad. Maybe not, and that's just me deluding myself, but I think it's possible that had the Bulls shown up strong and showed some semblance of being an up-and-coming team like we had initially thought when they started off the season 5-0, they would have had a better case at landing Giannis. The other thing I'll say in all of this, because I was trying to assess the fit of Giannis on the Bulls, particularly Giannis and Josh Giddey. I've seen some people say, that would be an awkward fit, and sure, maybe to an extent because Giannis is a very ball-dominant player, as is Josh Giddey, but Giddey, in my opinion, would also do really well with a legitimate scoring big and lob threat player like Giannis. Yeah, spacing wise, it wouldn't be the best, and it would limit Giddey's ability to drive and kick because Giannis isn't going to be hanging out along the perimeter. But Giddey is such a smart player, such a high IQ passer and playmaker. You'd have to think that the two-man game between him and Giannis operating in the pick and roll would prove to be very successful on offense. And then on defense, I mean, we all know the Bulls desperately need defensive-minded players. You're talking about one of the best defensive players in the game, a former Defensive Player of the Year winner, 5-time All-Defensive Team player. Yeah, he's not as good on defense as he once was when he was in his mid to late 20s, but he's still great at defending the pick and roll and limiting shots at the rim. Giannis also gives you more offensive rebounding, which the Bulls need, strong screener, which they also need. So yeah, I mean, I can understand that there are always going to be some concerns around the fit whenever you add a superstar to a roster and it changes the dynamic of everyone's role, but I would take that over just not having Giannis, period. The Bulls would still need to maintain some of their shooters though. Like, you do need shooters around Giannis, and the Bulls are, at least right now, one of the better three-point shooting teams in the league, but depending on what you would have to trade away to get him could have a negative impact on that. So yeah, we'll see where Giannis ultimately lands. Do I think it's going to be with the Bulls? No, but I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility either. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.